myself on. That's better. Okay, our reading this evening is from Mark chapter 9, beginning to read at verse 14. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus. "Everything is possible for one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can only come out by prayer." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So an interesting reading this evening, and before I start to speak about the reading itself, I want to put it in the context of what came before it and what comes after it, because actually it reads very differently if you take those two things into account. So immediately before this reading, Jesus has taken 3 disciples, he's gone up a mountain, leaving the others at the base of the mountain, and once he's reached the top of the mountain, he's been transfigured. So it's like one of those movie scene moments in the Gospels. So Jesus' clothes are glowing, we're told, brighter than anything in the world could ever bleach them. It's a real kind of Daz washing powder moment. Yeah, his clothes are glowing. And Moses and Elijah, those great figures from Israel's past, long dead, appear one either side of him, and they're having a conversation. And the disciples are understandably quite freaked out by this. And they don't quite know what to do, but they know it's amazing, and they're witnessing something incredible. And so Peter babbles the first thing that comes into his head, which is, let's build 3 shelters so we can all stay here. Let's build a shelter for you and for Moses and for Elijah. And we can all stay here in this moment. But of course they don't stay there. They don't stay in that moment. You can't stay in those amazing moments. The voice of God comes and says, "This is my son whom I love. Listen to him." And then that glory goes away. The voice fades. Moses and Elijah are gone. And when they look at Jesus, he looks just the same as he always did. And as they're coming down the mountain, Jesus gives them a slightly strange instruction. He says, "Do not tell anyone what you've seen until the Son of Man, until the Son of Man has risen from the dead." Do not tell anyone what you've seen until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. Okay, so hang on. They've just seen their friend who they've travelled around with, who's flesh and blood, glowing, talking to two long-dead heroes of their faith. Now, they're not allowed to talk about it. It's a bit mean, really, isn't it? Most amazing thing in your life, don't talk about it, don't tell anyone. Until, and here's the punchline, until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. Hang on, did we miss that bit? Don't tell anyone till I've risen from the dead. Bearing in mind nobody had done that before, either. So you can't talk about this amazing, incredible thing until this other amazing, incredible thing has happened. And then you can tell people. And that's what they've been doing as they come down the mountain into an argument. So there are some players in this argument. There's a distraught parent who has come for help for his son. And he's tried everything, and it's been awful. And you can see the suffering of this family in the few words that he says. He's been like it from childhood. The Spirit throws him into fire or water to try to kill him. Notice that word, try to kill him. What does that tell us? It tells us that his parents have become in the habit of saving him. They've had to save him multiple times because he's still alive here to be healed by Jesus now. So they have suffered as a family. And then they bring the boy. Father asks the disciples who are waiting at the bottom of the mountain, and they pray, or they ask, or they do whatever they do. We don't know what they do. All we know is the boy isn't healed. So they're the second players in this drama, the disciples that Jesus has left at the base of the mountain. Now, if I was one of them, I'd be feeling a bit rubbish, Not only have I been left at the base of the mountain while Jesus has gone off with the other three, but now there's this situation come up that I just can't handle on my own. Now, that's kind of familiar to me because I'm a curate and I'm learning. I'm, preaching and leading, what have you, with my L plates on. So being in situations that I haven't encountered before is actually quite familiar. And when you're learning something, you haven't got that confidence of someone who's been doing it a long time. But you've got this immense willingness to have a go, and sometimes it works, and sometimes you kind of go, splat. And you feel really rubbish. And that's basically what's happened to the disciples. They have face planted here in the face of somebody who really desperately needs their help. And then you've got the third set of players in this drama, and they are the teachers of the law. And they would really like to catch Jesus out. They'd really like to trap him doing something inappropriate. They want to get him into trouble. They want to challenge him and question him all the time. They don't believe in his authority, and they're out to get him. So a desperate dad, some disciples who've just failed, and some people who are out to get him. And Jesus walks into the middle of this. Now you might think, if you were Jesus, wouldn't you just have kept that, sort of dad's glowing whiteness? Wouldn't that have just sorted the situation out nicely if he could have just walked down the mountain with that amazing glowing whiteness still intact? But actually, that's not what Jesus does. He comes as his ordinary self into this situation, and he asks questions. He doesn't come in and boss and take charge immediately. He asks questions. What's going on? Why are you arguing? So he wants to know. He wants to know from the people involved what's happening. Why this argument? And the father comes forward. Well, of course he comes forward. He's desperate. And here's this Jesus he's heard about, this last chance help for his boy. And so Jesus hears, Jesus listens to what's gone on. And then he makes this comment, which is quite, it seems quite a challenging comment. He says, when the Father says, if you can do anything, take pity, Jesus says, if you can. Everything is possible for one who believes. Now hang on a minute, this is a family who've gone through torment and difficulty with this child who's suffering. And he's saying to them, hang on, if you can, he's saying if, everything is possible for one who believes. Now he's saying that to the dad, he's also saying that to the disciples, he's also saying that to these teachers of the law. And the Father's response is one that I love because it's one I return to again and again, because I'll put my hand up. I'm a doubter. I think pretty much everyone in the room is a doubter, if we're honest, from time to time. And actually doubt isn't a bad thing. Sometimes I think that people who are very certain are actually quite scary. People who know they're right in every situation are a little bit scary to me. I trust in God in every situation. I'm not sure I trust in myself in very many situations at all. So the Father says, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. I've come as far as I can. And let's face it, he must have believed to have made that journey with a child in that state. Help me to overcome my unbelief. So we have Jesus in glory. We have Jesus looking very ordinary and asking questions. And then we have Jesus who heals. We see Jesus take up that authority. We see Jesus command this spirit to leave the boy alone. Now, I'm not going to get into whether their medical understanding was the same as ours and whether it was really a spirit or whether he suffered from epilepsy or something like that. That's for scholars to debate. What interests me here is that Jesus heals the boy. He doesn't make the kid an object lesson. He doesn't spend ages preaching on about belief and faith and doubt. His priority is to heal this child. And he wants to heal this child before the massive crowd that's forming gets to them. Because actually, how frightening would it be for that child to come to consciousness surrounded by a massive crowd of people? So while everyone else is debating the ins and outs of it, Jesus is concerned with one person's faith, that father, and one person's well-being, that child. And the fact that his enemies are listening in is neither here nor there. The fact that his disciples could do with a bit of teaching is neither here nor there. At the moment, he is completely focused on that boy and that father. And he heals. And the child is restored to his father. And the story has its happy ending. So we have Jesus going from glory to looking pretty ordinary, to taking that amazing authority and doing that healing. And then immediately afterwards, we have Jesus talking to his disciples. They're saying, why couldn't we do it? Why couldn't we do what you do? And Jesus saying, this kind can come out only by prayer. And following that, the disciples then have an argument about which of them is the greatest, which gives Jesus a massive headache. And Jesus says, look, here's a child. You've got to be like this child if you want to be the greatest. Because what do children do well? They trust. What do children do well? We talked about it this morning. When a kid in a crowd is in trouble, what's the first thing they do? They look up for a grown-up. So Jesus is saying to the disciples, it's not you that casts out the spirits. It's not you that heals. It's not you that does these things. There's no magic. There's no magic in me. There's no magic in Andrew. There's no magic in any of us. We don't have the power. It's God's power. And these things that we face in life, these dark and these difficult things, can only be faced with prayer. Let's pause for a moment. I'd like you to do a difficult thing. I'd like you to think for a moment of a prayer you've stopped praying. A prayer you've stopped praying, not because it's been answered, but because it hasn't been answered. I want you to think, if you can, of a prayer that you've given up praying. Not because you don't want that answer any longer, not because you've grown beyond it, but because you've given up. It might be a big prayer you've given up praying. I spent 6 months feeling wildly cynical, and I gave up praying for world peace because I didn't think it would ever happen. So I gave up praying for it. And I have had to come gradually on the journey back to saying no. There's a quote doing the rounds of the internet, I can't remember the origin of it, but it says something along the lines of, you will never complete all the good work that there is to be done, but neither are you free to abandon it. You will never do it all. but neither are you free to abandon it. So for a moment, think of a prayer you've given up praying and just hold that in your heart. And I would like you to pray that prayer to God one more time, just in the quiet for a moment. Just between you and God. It can be hard to keep praying something when the end isn't in sight. Doesn't fit neatly, does it, into the testimony story? You know, I struggled, I suffered for a bit, I prayed, and zap, happy ever after. Doesn't always fit. Real life's a bit messier than that. It's a bit more difficult than that, isn't it? It's hard. And there are players in the drama of our lives, and this is the thought I want to leave you with. There are players in the drama of your lives that it's probably best you don't listen to. It's probably best that you don't listen to the teachers of the law, because they'll tell you if you just pray this particular way, or just use this particular set of words, or follow these particular rules, or live this particular way, you'll get everything you want. 1, you won't. 2, it's a nightmare way to try and live. That's not living.
It is said actually, of course, that eventually you get everything you wish for. So be very careful what you wish for.
That's true, we should be careful what we wish for. Second group of people, in the drama of our lives, are the people who want to do it in their own strength. I'll help, I'll fix it, I'll have a go. Great, wonderful, it's great to have help. But that's not enough on its own. Whatever social action we do, whatever things we do to make life better for ourselves and amongst ourselves, I'm not saying that's not fantastic, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And the third group of players are those who've actually seen God, seen what God can do, like those disciples on the mountain, seen the mysteries. But you know what? We still don't get it. We don't completely get it. We are going to fail. We're going to let each other down. We're going to let ourselves down. We're going to let other people down. That doesn't mean we give up. That doesn't mean we stop trying. That doesn't mean we don't reach out to that father desperate for help for the child. That doesn't mean that we don't reach out with our own needs. So let's listen to the voice of Jesus. And the voice of Jesus says, how long has this been going on? What's the problem? What are you arguing about? Don't you know everything's possible for one who believes? Trouble, evil spirit, call it what you will, come out of him, come out of her, come out of them. This can only be done by prayer. Amen.